I know I was supposed to teach you how to make sangria today, but I kind of drank the wine before I got around to making sangria. So instead, I thought I would dress up all crazy and talk about science, since apparently that's what Jasmine thinks I do all the time anyway. So I put on my engineering shirt and Jasmine's top hat, and I thought that I would talk about the electron transport chain. Okay, you'll remember in my drunk science video I talked about mitochondria. Mitochondria are bean-shaped organelles in the cytoplasm of the cell, and they are filled with liquid just like the rest of the cell, and inside that bean-shaped organelle, which is surrounded by a membrane, is another membrane that is all wrinkled up and folded up. We get our energy from ATP, and we get our ATP from sugar, and we make that ATP by breaking down the sugar, and we use 3 processes in succession. The first one is called glycolysis, the second one is called the Krebs cycle, and the final one is called the electron transport chain. These are really complicated chemical reactions that I memorized at one point, but today I don't want to talk about those. I want to talk about membranes and the electron transport chain. Membranes, cell membranes, the membrane around the mitochondria, they're made up of a bilayer of lipids. That bilayer is set up in such a way that there's a phosphate towards the outside and lipid to the inside. You know how you put some oil in water and the oil loops up around itself? Well, the thing about phospholipids is they automatically arrange themselves, just the way that little oil thing did, into this bilayer, where you have the part that likes to be in water towards the outside and the part that doesn't towards the inside. Well, what happens with this bilayer is that proteins embed themselves in the bilayer, and proteins are really complicated molecules, and parts of them also like to be in water, and parts of them also like to be in the fat or the lipid. And so the very fact of those proteins being in the bilayer helps the proteins arrange themselves into useful shapes. Some of these complex chemical reactions take place in the substrate, that is the jelly-like cytoplasm stuff. But some of these complicated chemical interactions take place across the membrane. Now remember, I said the mitochondria was a bean-shaped organelle filled up with a wrinkled-up membrane. That wrinkled-up membrane is where my favorite part, the electron transport chain, takes place. Now, a couple of byproducts from the Krebs cycle get thrust into the electron transport chain. And what the electron transport chain does is it breaks down a molecule and hands these electrons to each other in a chain. That's why it's called the electron transport chain. And every time the electron gets handed to the next molecule, some energy gets taken from it, and that energy is used to pump a hydrogen ion across the membrane. Now, hydrogen ions are sometimes called protons. They have a positive charge. They're really, really small. And what the electron transport chain does is it creates a gradient of these positively charged ions. So on one side of the membrane you have a whole lot of hydrogen ions, and on the other side you don't have so many. Well, we know from our early biology classes that wherever there's a lot of something, it tends to want to move to where there's less of it. It spreads out. Like when you put some food coloring in a glass of water, that food coloring slowly spreads out. Well, we have that process, the hydrogens just wanting to go from where there's a lot of them to where there's not very many of them by diffusion, but we also have the fact that there's a charge. They're positively charged here, and you don't have as much of a positive charge over here across that membrane. That helps those hydrogen ions really want to get across the membrane. The only way they can get across that membrane is through a channel in a protein. Remember, I said these proteins are embedded in the membrane, and they have a very specific shape because of the way they're built, and some parts of them like to be in the water, and some parts of them don't like to be in the water. And they have a channel through them, and the hydrogens go zooming through that channel, and the energy created when the hydrogens travel through that channel in the protein causes the protein to change shape. And it takes a phosphate molecule that is bonded to one part of it and an ADP that is bonded to the other part of it, and it goes and it makes ATP. And that is magic. That's just the coolest thing. We've taken the energy of a gradient. I mean, it just doesn't even seem like it's a thing. We've taken the energy of a concentration of atoms moving just through random action, the Brownian motion of the cell, and we've turned it into usable energy for the cell. And we've done that in this complicated, complex, intricate system. It's the coolest thing. It's like the study of biology is the study of magic. And when I learned about the electron transport chain and how the cell harnesses that gradient, that hydrogen ion gradient, into a usable form of energy for like all of the moving parts of the cell, the energy that your muscle cells use to contract, I was so excited about that I became a biology major. My name is Marilyn. This is Two Awesome Women, and I think you're awesome. Bye-bye.